My brothers and sisters, listen carefully. Poverty is not always about money. Poverty begins in the mind long before it reaches the pocket. From the day most people are born, they are programmed, not educated, not empowered, programmed to stay small, to fear abundance, and to believe that wealth is reserved for others. Most people believe poverty is something they are born into, something written in fate, luck, or circumstance. They say, "This is how my family has always lived," or "God chose this life for me," or "Some people are meant to be rich and others are not." This belief alone is one of the strongest chains keeping people poor. Poverty, in most cases, is not destiny. It is a program, a set of ideas, fears, habits, and beliefs that are installed into the mind over time, and anything that is programmed can be reprogrammed. From early childhood, the human mind is open, absorbent, and unquestioning. Whatever it repeatedly hears becomes truth. Many people grow up hearing statements like, "Money is hard to earn, rich people are corrupt, be grateful for what you have and don't ask for more," or "People like us don't become wealthy." These words may sound innocent, even moral, but they quietly form a mental ceiling. The mind accepts them as law. Over time, the person does not even question why they struggle. They assume struggle is normal. This is how poverty becomes internalized, not as a financial condition, but as an identity. Once poverty becomes part of identity, the person unconsciously defends it. Opportunities feel uncomfortable. Growth feels dangerous. Wealth feels unfamiliar. Even when chances appear, the programmed mind finds reasons to reject them. "I'm not ready. I don't deserve this. This won't work for someone like me." The tragedy is that the prison has no physical walls. It exists entirely in thought. Two people can stand in the same place, with the same resources, and experience completely different financial realities because they are operating from different internal programs. This is why simply giving someone money rarely changes their life. If the inner program remains the same, the money eventually disappears. The habits, decisions, and fears that created poverty will recreate it again. True change does not begin in the bank account. It begins in awareness. The moment a person realizes, "This way of thinking was taught to me. It is not who I am," a crack appears in the system. Awareness is the first act of freedom. Another powerful aspect of the poverty program is normalization of struggle. Many people wear struggle like a badge of honor. They glorify exhaustion, sacrifice, and barely surviving. They confuse suffering with righteousness. While effort and discipline are honorable, constant struggle is not a virtue. It is often a signal that something is misaligned. When a person believes struggle is noble, they stop seeking ease, efficiency, and growth. They remain loyal to pain because it feels familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it is destructive. The poverty program also teaches people to live reactively instead of intentionally. They respond to bills, emergencies, and pressure, but rarely plan, envision, or build. Long-term thinking feels like a luxury they cannot afford. Yet without long-term vision, life becomes a cycle of reaction. Wealth requires foresight, patience, and the ability to delay gratification. A programmed mind focuses only on today's survival, never tomorrow's expansion. Breaking this program requires courage because it means questioning what you were taught by parents, teachers, culture, and sometimes even religious misunderstanding. It means accepting that some beliefs you inherited were limitations, not wisdom. This does not mean blaming the past. It means taking responsibility for the future. At some point, every adult must choose whether to live by default or by design. Reprogramming begins with language. The words a person uses daily either reinforce poverty or dismantle it. Saying, "I can't afford it," reinforces lack. Saying, "How can I afford it?" opens possibility. One statement closes the mind, the other activates it. The brain responds to questions by searching for solutions. This small shift alone can begin changing behavior, decisions, and eventually outcomes. It also requires exposure to new inputs. A mind filled only with fear-based news, negative conversations, and limiting voices will reproduce limitation. A mind fed with growth-oriented ideas, discipline, faith, and wisdom begins to stretch. This is not about pretending problems don't exist. It is about refusing to let problems define identity. Most importantly, reprogramming poverty requires patience. Programs installed over decades do not disappear overnight. There will be moments of doubt, setbacks, and discomfort. Discomfort is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of change. Growth always feels unfamiliar at first. The mind resists what it does not recognize, even if it is good. In the end, poverty loses its power the moment a person understands this truth. Nothing is wrong with them. They were trained to think a certain way, and training can be undone. Wealth is not reserved for a special class of people. It is accessible to those willing to change how they see themselves, how they think, and how they act. Destiny is not what you inherit. It is what you repeatedly choose. The question is no longer whether poverty is real. The question is whether you will continue to accept the program, or whether you are ready to rewrite it. Because the moment you do, your life does not just change financially, it changes fundamentally. From the moment a child enters the world, they are placed inside a system that rewards obedience far more than it rewards thinking. This system does not openly announce its intentions. It presents itself as safety, structure, and responsibility. Yet, beneath the surface, it quietly conditions people to follow, to comply, and to wait for instructions. Over time, this conditioning becomes so normal that most people never question it. They assume this is simply how life works. But this system, while effective at producing workers, is extremely poor at producing wealth builders. From early education onward, success is defined narrowly. You are taught to listen, memorize, repeat, and pass tests. Creativity is tolerated only within strict limits. Curiosity is often discouraged when it disrupts order. Risk-taking is punished. Mistakes are marked in red ink. Over many years, the subconscious lesson becomes clear. Do not stand out, do not challenge authority, and do not fail. These lessons shape behavior long after school ends. Adults carry them into careers, relationships, and financial decisions without realizing it. The obedient mind seeks permission before acting. It looks for validation before moving forward. It waits for guarantees before trying. This mindset is incompatible with wealth creation. Wealth is built in uncertainty. Every meaningful financial breakthrough involves risk, experimentation, and the possibility of failure. The system teaches people to avoid all three. As a result, many become experts at following instructions, but novices at creating opportunities. Another consequence of this training is dependency. People are conditioned to depend on institutions, employers, and external structures for stability. They are taught that safety comes from a paycheck, a title, or approval from someone in authority. This belief makes individuals vulnerable. When the system changes, they panic because they were never trained to rely on their own thinking, adaptability, or value creation. True wealth requires self-reliance at the level of mindset, not isolation, but confidence in one's ability to learn, pivot, and solve problems. The obedient mindset also suppresses questioning. When people stop asking why, they stop growing. They accept rules, norms, and limitations without examining whether those rules serve them. Many financial limitations exist only because they were never challenged. People follow paths that were designed for mass management, not individual prosperity. They work harder within broken models instead of stepping back and asking whether the model itself makes sense. This conditioning is reinforced by fear. Fear of losing approval, fear of looking foolish, fear of being judged for trying something different. Society often celebrates success only after it is visible. while quietly discouraging the process that leads to it. Those who step outside the norm are labeled unrealistic, irresponsible, or arrogant until they succeed. Most people would rather be accepted in mediocrity than rejected in pursuit of growth. The system also trains people to confuse activity with progress. Being busy becomes a badge of honor. Long hours are praised. Exhaustion is normalized, yet many of these efforts are spent maintaining survival, not building assets. Obedience keeps people running on a treadmill, moving constantly but going nowhere. Wealth, on the other hand, requires strategic thinking, leverage, and the ability to pause, reflect, and redesign one's approach. Breaking free from this conditioning is uncomfortable because it requires unlearning. It requires admitting that following every rule did not lead to the life you hoped for. This can feel like betrayal of everything you were taught, but maturity is the ability to revise beliefs when evidence demands it. Independent thinking is not rebellion for its own sake. It is responsibility for one's own life. When a person begins to think independently, they stop asking only, "What am I told to do?" and start asking, "What creates value?" They begin to see opportunities where others see risk. They understand that rules are often guidelines created for averages, not laws of nature. They learn discernment, when to follow and when to innovate. This shift alone can dramatically alter financial outcomes. Independent thinking does not mean rejecting structure or discipline. In fact, wealth builders often have more discipline than anyone else. The difference is that their discipline serves their vision, not someone else's agenda. They choose their commitments intentionally instead of inheriting them by default. Over time, as people reclaim their ability to think, they also reclaim confidence. Confidence grows not from certainty, but from experience, especially the experience of surviving mistakes. Each risk taken, each failure analyzed, weakens the fear that once controlled them. They begin to trust themselves, and self-trust is a cornerstone of wealth. In the end, the greatest lie the system tells is that obedience equals security. History repeatedly proves the opposite. Systems change, jobs disappear, rules evolve. Those who relied solely on obedience are left unprepared. Those who cultivated thinking, adaptability, and value creation find ways forward. The path out of poverty is not rebellion against society. It is awakening within it. It is the realization that you were trained to function, not to flourish. Once you see this, you gain a choice. You can continue following paths designed for control and predictability, or you can begin designing your own. And the moment you choose to think independently, you take the first real step toward lasting wealth. Fear is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, and when it comes to money, it becomes a silent prison. Many people believe their financial struggles are caused by lack of opportunity, bad luck, or external circumstances. While these factors can play a role, fear often does far more damage than any outside obstacle. Fear does not merely limit action, it slowly trains the mind to accept limitation as safety. Over time, this acceptance becomes a cage that feels familiar, even comfortable, and most people never realize they are locked inside it. Fear begins early. A child takes a risk, makes a mistake, and is corrected, laughed at, or punished. The lesson absorbed is not just be careful, but failure is dangerous. As this lesson repeats, the mind starts associating risk with pain and embarrassment. Later in life, this translates into avoiding new ventures, hesitating to invest in oneself, and staying in situations that feel secure but unfulfilling. Financial growth, however, always requires stepping into the unknown. When fear dominates, growth is postponed indefinitely. One of the most common financial fears is the fear of loss. People are so focused on protecting what little they have that they never give themselves the chance to create more. They cling to unstable jobs because a predictable paycheck feels safer than uncertainty. even if that job slowly drains their energy and potential. This fear keeps them trapped in short-term thinking. They choose immediate comfort over long-term freedom, not because it is wise, but because it feels less frightening. Another powerful fear is the fear of judgment. Many people would rather remain poor than be seen trying and failing. Society can be harsh toward those who step outside accepted paths. The fear of being criticized by family, friends, or peers silently shapes decisions. People hide their ambitions, delay their plans, or abandon their ideas to avoid standing out. Yet every financially free individual had to endure misunderstanding at some point. Fear of judgment keeps people living lives that look acceptable on the outside, but feel suffocating on the inside. Fear also disguises itself as logic. The mind becomes very skilled at justifying inaction. It says, "Now is not the right time. I need to learn more first, or this won't work in my situation." While preparation is important, fear uses overthinking as a delay tactic. It creates endless analysis to avoid decisive movement. Over time, opportunities pass, confidence erodes, and the person concludes that success simply wasn't meant for them. Perhaps the most damaging fear is the fear of success. This fear is rarely acknowledged, but it is deeply real. Success brings responsibility, visibility, and change. It can disrupt relationships and challenge identity. Some people subconsciously sabotage progress because success would require them to become someone unfamiliar. Remaining poor, though painful, feels predictable. The mind often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility. Fear also limits earning potential by narrowing vision. When fear is in control, people aim low. They settle for what seems achievable rather than what is possible. They avoid learning new skills because being a beginner feels uncomfortable. They decline opportunities that stretch them because stretching feels unsafe. Over time, this pattern compounds. Small decisions made out of fear create a life that feels smaller than it should be. Breaking free from fear does not mean eliminating it. Fear is a natural response to uncertainty. The difference between those who remain poor and those who grow wealthy is not the absence of fear, but their relationship with it. Wealthy thinkers learn to act in spite of fear. They interpret fear as a signal of growth rather than a warning to stop. Each time they move forward despite fear, its power weakens. Courage is not a personality trait. It is a practiced behavior. It grows through repetition. Small acts of bravery, making a call, learning a new skill, taking a calculated risk, build evidence that fear is survivable. Over time, the nervous system adapts. What once felt terrifying becomes manageable. Confidence emerges not from success alone, but from realizing that failure does not destroy you. Fear thrives in isolation and silence. When people never speak about their fears, those fears feel larger than they are. Exposure to others who have taken risks and survived helps dissolve the illusion that fear equals danger. The more examples a person sees of ordinary people overcoming fear, the harder it becomes to justify inaction. In the end, fear is not the enemy of wealth. Surrender to fear is. Fear will always whisper reasons to stay where you are. It will promise safety while quietly stealing potential. The question is not whether fear will appear, but whether it will be allowed to decide your future. Poverty persists not because people are incapable, but because fear convinces them to live beneath their capacity. The moment a person chooses courage over comfort, action over avoidance, and growth over safety, the prison door opens. Wealth begins not when fear disappears, but when it is no longer obeyed. Many people spend their entire lives working hard, yet very few ever become truly wealthy. This is not because effort has no value, but because effort alone is often misdirected. One of the most deeply ingrained programs in society is the belief that money is earned primarily by trading time for income. From an early age, people are taught to study, get a job, and exchange hours for a paycheck. While this model can provide survival, it rarely leads to abundance. Wealth does not come from working harder for money. It comes from creating value that serves others at scale. When a person's income is tied directly to their time, their earning potential is automatically limited. There are only so many hours in a day, and exhaustion eventually becomes the ceiling. No matter how skilled or dedicated someone is, this model keeps them confined. Yet most people never question it, because it is what they were taught. They learn to ask, how much does this job pay per hour? Instead of asking, what problem can I solve that people will pay for regardless of my time? Value creation requires a different way of thinking. It begins with understanding that money is not a reward for effort, but a response to usefulness. The marketplace does not pay based on how tired you are or how sincere your intentions may be. It pays based on how effectively you meet needs, solve problems, or improve lives. When someone focuses only on effort, they remain dependent on employers and circumstances. When they focus on value, they become relevant, adaptable, and harder to replace. Another limitation of the time for money mindset is that it discourages learning beyond what is immediately required. People train only for specific roles, not for transferable skills. They become specialists in narrow tasks, but lack broader understanding of how systems work. This makes them efficient workers, but not creators or builders. Wealth builders, on the other hand, continuously expand their skill sets. They learn how to communicate, manage, innovate, and think strategically because these abilities multiply value rather than merely maintain it. The time-based model also teaches people to avoid thinking like owners. Employees are trained to complete tasks, not to ask how processes could be improved or expanded. Initiative is often discouraged unless requested. Over time, people lose the habit of seeing opportunities. They focus on instructions rather than outcomes. This mindset makes it difficult to transition into roles where income is linked to results instead of hours. Creating value also involves understanding leverage. Leverage allows one action to produce results repeatedly. A product, a system, a piece of knowledge, or a service that can reach many people without proportional effort is a form of leverage. Most people never build leverage because they were never taught to think beyond immediate labor. They stay stuck in cycles of repetition, doing the same work over and over for the same pay, wondering why nothing changes. There is also an emotional comfort in trading time for money. The rules are clear, the expectations are defined, and the responsibility is limited. Value creation introduces uncertainty. It requires initiative, experimentation, and accountability. Many avoid it not because they lack ability, but because it demands personal ownership of outcomes. Yet ownership is where wealth grows. Responsibility and reward are inseparable. Shifting from working for money to creating value does not require abandoning discipline or effort. In fact, it demands more intentional effort. The difference is direction. Effort invested in building something meaningful compounds over time. Effort spent only to maintain income resets every day. One builds momentum, the other sustains survival. Value creation also aligns with long-term thinking. Instead of asking how to earn today, the focus becomes how to remain useful tomorrow. This mindset encourages innovation and continuous improvement. It also reduces fear, because value creators are not dependent on a single source of income. They can adapt as needs change. In the end, the reason many people remain poor despite working hard is not lack of effort, but lack of alignment. They were taught to sell their time, not their insight, creativity, or ability to solve problems. Once a person understands that money follows value, not labor, everything begins to shift. Choices become strategic. Learning becomes intentional. Work becomes meaningful. True wealth is built when effort is invested in creating something that continues to serve others even when you are not present. The moment a person stops asking, "How much can I earn today?" and starts asking, "How much value can I create?" They step onto a different path, and that path, while challenging, leads far beyond the limits of survival into the realm of abundance. The financial reality of a person is shaped long before money ever enters their hands. It is shaped in the mind through repeated thoughts, spoken words, and internal dialogue that quietly directs behavior. Many people underestimate the power of this inner world, assuming that thoughts are harmless and words are just expressions. In truth, thoughts are instructions to the subconscious, and words are commands that shape identity. When these instructions are rooted in lack, limitation becomes a lived experience. Most people speak about money in negative, restrictive ways without realizing the impact. Phrases like "I'm bad with money," "I'll never be rich," or "money always disappears," are repeated casually, often as jokes. The subconscious mind does not understand humor or exaggeration. It only understands repetition. Over time, these statements become accepted as facts. The mind then works tirelessly to prove them true by influencing decisions, habits, and expectations. Thoughts function in a similar way. A person who constantly thinks in terms of scarcity sees the world through a narrow lens. Opportunities appear risky instead of promising. Growth feels threatening rather than exciting. The mind filters reality to confirm its existing beliefs. This is why two people can encounter the same situation and respond in completely different ways. One sees possibility, the other sees danger. The difference lies not in intelligence, but in mental conditioning. The repetition of negative thought patterns creates emotional responses that reinforce behavior. A person who believes they are not capable of managing wealth will feel anxious when money increases. That anxiety leads to avoidance, impulsive spending, or self-sabotage. These actions then confirm the original belief. The cycle continues, strengthening the program. Without awareness, years can pass in this loop, with the individual believing circumstances are to blame. Language also shapes what a person believes is possible. When someone constantly says, "This is just how life is," they close the door to change. Such statements signal resignation. The mind stops searching for alternatives. Creativity shuts down. Hope fades quietly, replaced by acceptance of limitation. This is not humility. It is mental surrender. Changing financial outcomes requires deliberate shifts in both thought and speech. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending problems do not exist. It means choosing language that empowers rather than traps. Replacing "I can't" with "I'm learning how" keeps the mind engaged. Asking better questions stimulates better thinking. The brain is a problem-solving tool, but it responds only when invited. Awareness is the turning point. The moment a person begins to observe their inner dialogue, they often realize how harsh, limiting, and repetitive it has become. Many people would never speak to others the way they speak to themselves. This inner criticism erodes confidence and reinforces fear. Rewriting this dialogue takes effort and consistency, but it is possible. The mind is not fixed, it is adaptive. Thoughts influence emotions, emotions influence actions, and actions shape results. This chain operates constantly, whether consciously directed or not. When left unattended, it defaults to whatever patterns were learned earliest. Taking control means interrupting automatic reactions and choosing responses intentionally. This process feels unnatural at first because it challenges long-held habits. Discomfort is a sign of change, not failure. Positive thinking alone is not enough. What matters is alignment between belief and action. Words must be supported by behavior, even in small ways. Each aligned action reinforces the new belief. Over time, evidence accumulates, and confidence becomes grounded rather than imagined. The inner world begins to match the outer one. Another important aspect is emotional neutrality around money. When money is associated with fear, guilt, or shame, clarity is lost. Calm thinking allows better decisions. Detaching self-worth from financial status creates space for growth. A person is not poor or rich by identity. They are simply at a point in a process. This perspective reduces pressure and encourages learning. In the end, financial transformation is not a single event, but a gradual shift in how a person thinks, speaks, and responds to life. Wealth begins internally, as a pattern of thought that allows for expansion. When the inner dialogue changes, perception changes. When perception changes, choices change. And when choices change consistently, results follow. The world reflects what the mind repeatedly expects. Those who remain trapped in lack often do so not because opportunity is absent, but because their thoughts and words never allow them to see or accept it. The moment a person takes responsibility for their inner language, they reclaim power. From that point on, poverty is no longer a life sentence. It becomes a temporary condition that can be transformed through conscious effort and awareness. Many people believe wealth is purely a financial matter, something earned through effort, intelligence, or luck alone. What they often overlook is the role of spiritual and inner alignment in shaping material outcomes. When a person is disconnected from deeper principles such as gratitude, integrity, generosity, and purpose, money becomes difficult to sustain, even if it is acquired. This disconnection creates invisible blocks that no amount of hard work can fully overcome. At a deep level, wealth flows where there is harmony between intention, action, and values. When these are misaligned, inner conflict arises. A person may desire abundance, yet internally feel unworthy of it. They may ask for prosperity, yet harbor resentment, envy, or constant dissatisfaction. These inner states quietly influence behavior. Decisions become reactive instead of thoughtful. Money is spent to soothe emotions rather than to build stability. Opportunities are missed because the mind is clouded by negativity. One of the most common forms of misalignment is ingratitude. This does not always appear as outright complaining. Sometimes it appears as chronic dissatisfaction. A person may always be focused on what is missing rather than what is present. This mindset trains the brain to perceive lack as the dominant reality. When the mind is conditioned to see lack everywhere, it behaves accordingly, clinging, fearing, and mistrusting. Such behavior repels growth rather than attracting it. Generosity is another principle often misunderstood. Many believe they must first become wealthy before they can give. In reality, generosity is not about the amount given, but the posture of the heart. A person who is unwilling to share when they have little will rarely share when they have much. Generosity cultivates trust in life, in provision, and in one's ability to receive again. When generosity is absent, fear tightens its grip, and money is held with anxiety. That anxiety often leads to poor financial decisions. Integrity also plays a crucial role. When actions contradict values, internal tension builds. A person may cut corners, act dishonestly, or pursue money in ways that feel wrong to them. Even if such actions bring short-term gain, they create long-term instability. The mind remains restless, always expecting loss or exposure. This inner stress affects focus, clarity, and confidence. True prosperity requires peace of mind, and peace of mind comes from alignment between what one believes and how one acts. Purpose is another key element. Money pursued without meaning often feels empty and unsatisfying. When a person lacks a sense of purpose, motivation fades quickly, effort feels heavy, burnout becomes common. Purpose gives direction to wealth, transforming it from a goal into a tool. When money is connected to service, contribution, or growth, it gains momentum. The pursuit becomes sustainable because it is anchored in something larger than self-interest. Many people pray or hope for financial improvement, yet remain internally unchanged. They ask for external results without addressing internal patterns. Alignment requires inner work, examining attitudes, releasing bitterness, and cultivating patience. This work is subtle and often uncomfortable, but it is essential. Without it, external success feels fragile, easily lost at the first challenge. Spiritual alignment does not mean perfection. It means awareness and intention. Everyone experiences doubt, fear, and frustration. The difference lies in whether these states are acknowledged and guided, or allowed to dominate. Alignment is a practice, not a destination. It involves returning repeatedly to principles that ground and stabilize the mind. When alignment is present, decisions become clearer. A person is less reactive to short-term pressures and more focused on long-term well-being. They choose growth over impulse, learning over pride, and patience over desperation. These choices compound over time, creating steady progress rather than chaotic swings. In the end, wealth is not merely accumulated, it is sustained through alignment. Without inner harmony, money feels heavy and unstable. With alignment, even modest resources feel sufficient and expandable. The outer world responds to the inner state more than most people realize. Poverty often persists not because of a lack of effort, but because of unresolved inner conflict. When a person aligns gratitude with action, generosity with wisdom, and purpose with pursuit, barriers begin to dissolve. Wealth then becomes a natural extension of a balanced inner life, not a constant struggle against it. One of the most subtle yet powerful reasons many people remain stuck financially is the habit of waiting. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for permission, or waiting for someone else to change their circumstances. This waiting feels responsible and cautious on the surface, but underneath it often hides fear, doubt, and a lack of self-trust. Over time, waiting becomes a lifestyle, and life quietly passes by while potential remains unused. From an early age, people are trained to wait. Wait your turn, wait for instructions, wait until you are ready. While patience has its place, excessive waiting conditions the mind to associate action with external approval. People grow into adults who feel uncomfortable moving unless conditions are perfect. The problem is that perfect conditions rarely exist. Growth happens in uncertainty, not comfort. Those who wait for certainty often wait forever. Financial progress requires movement, even when the path is unclear. Every successful person began without full knowledge, without guarantees, and often without confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action, it is a result of action. When people reverse this order, they trap themselves. They believe they must feel ready before they act, but readiness comes from experience, not thought. Action creates feedback, and feedback creates learning. Waiting also erodes momentum. Each delayed decision reinforces hesitation. The mind learns to avoid responsibility by postponing it. Opportunities that require timely action are missed, not because they were impossible, but because the individual was still preparing mentally. Over time, this pattern becomes identity. People begin to see themselves as cautious, realistic, or unlucky, when in reality they are simply inactive. Another reason waiting is so damaging is that it shifts responsibility outward. When someone says, "I'll start when things improve," they give power to circumstances. When they say, "I'll act when I feel confident," they give power to emotions. Both circumstances and emotions are unstable. Wealth builders learn to act despite emotional discomfort and imperfect conditions. They understand that responsibility is not about control, but about response. Fear plays a central role in waiting. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of making the wrong choice. Waiting feels safer than risking a mistake. Yet mistakes are not the opposite of success, they are part of the process. Every error provides information. Without errors, there is no adjustment, and without adjustment, there is no growth. Waiting avoids mistakes, but it also avoids progress. Waiting also affects how people view time. Time begins to feel abundant, as if opportunities will always return. In reality, opportunities change form, and some never return at all. Skills become outdated, markets shift, energy declines. Waiting assumes the future will be more favorable than the present, without evidence. Those who act understand that time is not neutral. It either compounds effort or compounds regret. The habit of waiting also diminishes self-trust. Each time a person ignores an inner urge to act, they weaken their confidence. The inner voice grows quieter, doubt grows louder. Over time, people stop believing in their own ability to make decisions. They become dependent on advice, opinions, and validation. While guidance is valuable, over-reliance on it paralyzes initiative. Breaking the waiting pattern requires a shift in identity. Instead of seeing oneself as someone who reacts, one must become someone who initiates. This does not mean reckless action. It means thoughtful movement. It means taking small, deliberate steps even when the full picture is unclear. Small actions build evidence. Evidence builds confidence. Confidence fuels larger action. Action also clarifies purpose. Many people claim they do not know what they want, but clarity rarely comes from thinking alone. It comes from doing. Trying different paths reveals preferences, strengths, and limitations. Waiting for clarity before acting is like waiting to learn how to swim without entering the water. In the end, poverty often persists not because of lack of talent or opportunity, but because of delayed action. Waiting feels harmless, but its cost is immense. It steals time, erodes belief, and turns potential into regret. The world does not reward those who wait to be ready. It rewards those who are willing to begin. The moment a person stops waiting and starts moving, even imperfectly, their relationship with life changes. Momentum replaces stagnation. Learning replaces fear. Ownership replaces excuses. Wealth is built by those who understand that action is the bridge between intention and reality. When waiting ends, growth begins, and with it, the possibility of lasting abundance.